welcome aboard the Knitty Stew podcast. My name is Leanne. I am the Knitty Stew, and this is my podcast channel vlog where I talk all things knitting on my layovers, and I do my best to show you little bits and pieces of the wonderful Canadian cities I lay over in and their local yarn scene if I'm able to, and I am able to today. Welcome everyone. I really appreciate everyone being here. I'm trying to get comfy. Awesome. Yeah, I really want to just send out some big appreciation for everyone who is now following the channel, and basically I feel like it's my big knitting circle of friends from the globe, and it's amazing, and I love it so very much. Thank you very much for all the positivity and this new creativity, this outlet, and for being gentle with me as I work through some of the technical difficulties, as well as some, I don't know, it's just a learning curve, as is anything, and everyone has been so wonderful and welcoming and generous, so thank you for that. Thank you for spending the time with me, however long it might be. I'm trying a little something today where I am semi-organized, but not super organized. I'm going to do what Wayne Dyer, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, said that he found in the beginning of his lecturing when he was doing stuff like that. This is not a lecture, by the way. This is me sharing my knitting. But he would prepare, like have notes and be just like all super organized. And then as he went on, he realized he did a better job when he just went with the flow, when he went with what comes naturally. So if you've watched me from video 1, you'll realize that I just kind of started. And I think that's sort of what I'm trying to do, is have a conversation. So when I try to get super organized, I don't know if that actually serves me well. So we'll see how this goes today. And yeah, thanks for being here. Without further ado, let me tell you where I'm coming from today. I am in the beautiful city of Saskatoon, the city of Saskatoon in the province of Saskatchewan. Say that 3 times really fast. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Not bad. I was practicing prior to starting the video today, so I have an advantage. Yes, and also I want to acknowledge that I am here nestled on the bank of the South Saskatchewan River on Treaty 6 territory. It encompasses the traditional territories of numerous First Nations, including Cree, Dene, Nakota, Saulteaux, Ojibwe, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So thank you. I'm honored to be a settler here and hanging out in downtown Saskatoon today. Saskatoon itself, I did a little bit of Googling, and it is derived from the Cree word for the edible red maroon berry that grows here. It's delicious. It's called the Saskatoon, and later today I think I might venture out and find myself some pie. Saskatoon berry pie. I would assume this would be the height of the season for that, and of course I've had jam, and what else have I had? I've had Saskatoon berry pie, but maybe I should go find a local restaurant and treat myself to that today. For now, my beverage of choice, and I hope you have something. I'm just having my smoothie. I bring frozen protein shakes from home, and I freeze them and put them in my lunch kit, and then it's sort of like, it's like an ice pack. It keeps my lunch cool, and they're also delicious and nutritious. Big recommendation to the Nalgene. They do not leak. You can freeze them solid, and then they don't, if they swell up, they come back down, as far as like taking them in your lunch kit goes. Big fan. I have been using them for years and years. I even use the small ones for my travel kits. Yeah, Nalgene. And I was buying them from Mountain Equipment Co-op, and then I just went on the website the last time when I needed new ones, and they were less expensive by going to nalgene.com. So yes, it is a lovely day here in Saskatoon, and I've got my things to show you. I've got 3 small and like little finished objects. I have 2 works in progress to share. One was an emergency, you'll understand. And then I have 2 things on my queue that I'd like to show you that I plan on getting on the needles as soon as I can. It's been pretty busy. I think since the last time I podcasted, vlogged, I was able to get out on the Bow River for a little, R&R with the husband in our kayaks. So that was nice. And on the other days off, we're dealing with some, maybe many of you can relate, the aging parents thing is happening with my in-laws. So we've been doing that a lot, moving, getting everyone settled into some assisted living, that kind of stuff. So days off have been very busy, just all that adulting stuff. So I really love my overnights, and this overnight was 28 hours and with air conditioning. It's actually a comfortable 23 degrees, 74 Fahrenheit here today, but this summer has been super hot for so many of us, unless you're in the southern hemisphere. How hot is it where you are? And are you crazy like me and knitting with 100% wool? I did do some cotton wool blend over here, but primarily I've been just sitting in the colder areas and knitting and not choosing to knit with anything different plant fiber. But speaking of that, what I am wearing today is 100% linen. This is a knit that I made last summer. It's called the Dangling Conversation shawl. And it's made with one skein of, let me back up here. Look at the drape in that linen. It's Louie linen wet spun. I'll get a little closer. It was actually pretty crunchy, and then I washed and I dried it in the dryer, and it softened up a fair bit. And I used 4mm needle, US 6. It is a paid pattern on Ravelry. I'll link it below. And it goes very well with your Motley Crue t-shirts that you may or may not wear. Or is that just me? It could be. Any other headbangers out there? Let me know. Yeah, so this little number, I think, hang on, I got my notes here. I'm gonna try not to use paper because it's really crinkly, I noticed in the last episode. Yeah, this was 270 yards. That's not a lot. And I went and had a look at the pattern because I kind of forgot. And it's actually, it comes, so this was the small version, but there's a large, no medium. It just goes right from small to large to extra large, depending on how you like it. But I think I was looking for a quick finish, and also this linen had been in my stash for a decade. And I used it up, and that always feels really good. So that's what I'm wearing today. My finished objects, I had purchased the yarn for this at the newest yarn shop in Calgary, and it's Woolfolk Far. It's my 10th on the Sea Train hat. I'll try it on for you. With just the right amount of slouch, I think, in my opinion. And it's good for guys, good for girls. And it's a free pattern from Espace Tricot. And this took, because I do leave out a couple of rounds, using a US 7, a 4.5mm, just for the ribbing part. That's about, I mean, you can't tell, the whole thing is ribbing, but like the brim area. And then after the 3 inches using the 4.5mm, I switch up to a US 8, 5mm for the remainder. And I'm able to squeak this out. This is 50 grams. This is one ball of Woolfolk Far in the colorway, what is this, apricot, right? Light apricot. So that'll be nice once fall arrives. Pretty happy with that. And the decreases on this hat, as some of you know, I have opinions about decreases. This is a purl 3 together. And I love how neat and tidy and beautiful it is, but it can be tricky. You really have to watch to get it underneath all 3 to do a purl 3 together. After 10, you get pretty good at it though, so it's my 10th one. And there will be more. There will be more. If you don't make it with any slouch, it could be like your standard dude watch cap, toque, beanie. And I was making them out of Brooklyn tweed shelter, and they're light as air that way as well. Same with this lovely Woolfolk far, which I quite like. So yes, that's number 1. My next finished object, cute warning, stand by. This is Froggie number 2 from, of course, Claire Garland Dot Pebbles pattern, Frog. So I knit this guy with the proper needle size that she recommends. I made one for my daughter in a slightly smaller gauge. And I'll put all the details about this little guy and the eyes and the yarn I used, which I just think I'm liking him a lot. And I'm gonna put in some footage of him hanging out with the other frog. So far there's 2. And thank you for people who have been commenting that they're making their own frogs. Frog Army! The next thing that I had planned to make, and I did, he needed a little sweater. Look at it. So this is Frog sweater. And it was also a pattern that was made for Frog. I'll put it on him and show you. I do have some thoughts about the Frog sweater. I was enjoying knitting it, and I used little scraps of Jameson Shetland 2-ply, fingering weight. A fair bit of little strands to weave in because it's stripy. We're just gonna pop that on. We're in the air conditioning so he can handle the heat. Okay, but I actually ended up frogging it back because, as per written, perhaps my Froggie's body was a little shorter. The original one was way too big and too long, but this one I think fits him pretty good. It will be great. He'll be fall fashion ready, and it is a turtleneck. And it was too hot for Frog to be wearing his sweater, so he just put on a little blue and white stripy t-shirt to have a little swing in the front yard. So it looks like my daughter is wanting to claim both of them, but I really like this little guy. Good thing I have a little bit more of this Drops alpaca. It's Drops alpaca silk, or not silk, it's alpaca mix. And then, yeah, it just, they whip out like so fast. And it's worth any of the fiddliness of like the frog fingers, but still. And Claire Garland is brilliant where she puts in little short rows, not short rows, sorry, like decreases, little knit 2 togethers, so that it gets these little bends, like thick thin. Mwah. Must kiss the Froggie. He is super cute. He's given me a great amount of joy. I hope whatever you're making right now is giving you the squeal of like, this is awesome. I have realized as I go to show you my 3rd finished object that for me, hats are like my socks. Like for most people, they have their socks that they always have with them, or they have a pair on the needles. It just seems to me this ongoing thing of what hat am I gonna make next? Please let me know what you have on your needles. I do enjoy reading that and the inspiration whenever anybody tells me what they're making. I pop on the Ravelry and I see so many new inspirations, and it gives, my queue is getting longer and longer. We'll just put it that way. Yeah, I wanted to show you my next finished object, and then maybe I'll stop for a second and show you my adventure out into Toontown, which Saskatoon is also known as. All right, so I have gone down the unspun wool rabbit hole. I'm going to thank Loretta from Knit My Way Home podcast, and she introduced me to her friends who have started a new podcast. It's called Knitting a Good Yarn, Jackie and Carmen. And they, you know, I've already been curious about unspun wool, but I'd had that experience earlier in my knitting life where I tried using 6-ply unspun, which is from a local mill in Alberta called Custom Woolen Mills, and it just split. I didn't understand how to work with it properly, and it scared me off of it. But I have a sweater quantity of this 6-ply unspun in my yarn cupboard, and thanks to, you know, the new information around unspun and this resurgence of you got to try this stuff out is like gold. I've gone down this rabbit hole and I've gone pretty deep. I purchased some, it's called Thrive Unspun from Woollentwine Studio. Sorry for all the slamming out there in the hallway. People are coming and going. It's busy here in Saskatoon. Yeah, so I bought one, what is called a plate from Woollentwine Studio, and in the colorway Breeze. And I started doing some swatching, and I started with the 5mm US 8, and I had a little bit of trouble at the beginning. To work with it, 2 strands held together is the recommendation, and so I pulled from the center of the ball and got this massive bloop as yarn barf. And then once I wound it all into these two strand balls, I was able to work with it quite well. And this is what it looks like knit on a US 8 5mm. So I knit this flat, and the gauge I got on it was, I think I got 16 stitches over 4 inches, and it's light as air. Okay, and then I went up to, I have a 10.75 US, which is a very random needle size, 7mm, but I didn't want to go up to an 11, so I went just down, like an 8mm, I went down, so I went to the 7mm, and that is also knit double, so there's 2 strands here. Look at them. And I like the gauge. I think they both turned out really well, and these are blocked. I put them in water and soaked them. And then I jumped right in. So the pattern I chose was on my queue in my last podcast, Tamitik. And it's a lovely slip stitch pattern made with chunky yarn. Look at. I just thought that was so pretty. And then I started working with it, and I thought, oh, okay, well, the nature of unspun yarn is that it has staple lengths based on whatever sheep breed it uses. So if you hold it close together with your fingers and pull, I'm pulling right now, it's quite strong. But if I was to move away, like farther, a few inches apart, and pull, it just pulls like, oh, falls right apart. So I was like, oh, maybe a slip stitch pattern, and this was a 3 slip stitch, slipping 3 stitches. I was like, oh dear. Anyways, I just thought I would go for it. I decided to be fearless, and there it is. This is my Tamitik, made out of Woollentwine Studio Unspun in the Breeze colorway. This colorway is sold out on her website, but she has another one called Storm Cloud. And yeah, I think the texture is great, and I'm gonna put it on so you can have a look. Take a look. I certainly don't need it in 23-degree weather, but I like the texture. I like how it showed the texture, and yeah, I think it looks like I was hoping it would. And pom-pom, as that she has in her pattern, would make it, whoops, sorry about that. A pom-pom, I think, would make it flop down nicely, or just like not stick up too high, which is kind of like boop, if I got a big pom-pom. And I do have wool left, but I'm like, oh, I'm kind of like, I'm sort of hoarding it. I don't want to use the rest of it because there's no more from Woollentwine. I have this much left, and these are only wound as not double strand together. So I have 50 grams left, and believe it or not, this, made with US 11 8mm needles for the body, weighs less than this. So this is 50 point something grams, and I think this is at like 49.2. Mind blown, right? This is the beauty of Unspun. I get that the weight, like, I was making a lot of super chunky, bulky garments, which are great for, like, I was doing some markets and selling things. I had another business called 1111 Knitwear, and I would sell like super chunky hats and stuff. But my hesitation with them was that they're so heavy, and they also would stretch out, and I was making them with Lion brand wool, woolies, like the super chunky one, and when people would sweat they would get kind of big. So there was some things going on, and I was like, I think I'm gonna go to lighter gauged garments. But I have a special place in my heart for super chunky knits and bulky knits, but they need to be light. So I was investing in things like Cory by Brooklyn Tweed, because that stuff is very, very light because of the nature of how it's spun with the Woollentwine. A friend of mine who is a big Viking dude wanted a massive cardigan. He actually commissioned me for it, and it was my pleasure to make it for him, but I knew if I made it with regular bulky yarn, it would just be too heavy. And yeah, so I made him buy the Brooklyn Tweed, and I'll put a picture here actually because I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. That sweater, made without the airiness of the Woollentwine of the Cory, would have been really heavy. And now, if anyone is into this rabbit hole of the Unspun with me, I'm like rethinking all these things that I've made with, it's like, oh, I could make that with Unspun. Ooh, I could try that. And the one that's very, very cool is the, I'm gonna probably butcher this, Honer Ach Air, which is knitted in yarn. It's got a cult following, of which I am now a part, because I'm very intrigued by the way it's created, and the maker herself, Caroline, I'm a Patreon, and on there she puts some really deep thoughts, and she explains the inspirations behind the colors, and the old equipment and machine that they use to create this pre-yarn it's super interesting, and I'm really liking it. Today is August 1st, and there is a shop update happening today, and I was like, oh, what should I get? But I'm putting a lot of thought into my purchasing. I want to be intentional about what I'm buying these days. So even when I went out to see the local yarn store here, I just went out to see. I didn't buy anything. I'm trying to purchase per project. Now, it doesn't always go that way, because sometimes things are just so beautiful. Like when I went to Newfoundland and I saw that the local dyer windswept fibers, I was like, I need this woolly souvenir. But I would like to be more intentional and mindful, because that's just where I'm going in my life. Less is more. If you can relate to that, I'm sure as knitters that's tricky. I'm gonna show you some footage from my adventure out into Saskatoon. So yeah, what I did was pop down to the lobby and signed out this lovely bike. So I cruised around. I looked at this famous double-decker bus that is parked out in front of this old historic hotel, probably one of the most famous hotels here in Saskatoon. Saskatoon is actually a very eclectic city. It offers big city funkiness, but it's got that small town. The population of Saskatoon is only 337,000 approximately. So yeah, that's pretty wild. It's pretty small, and coming from a city in Calgary, which is I think we're at 1.4 million. It is actually also known as the Paris of the Prairies. And that's because of all the bridges. There are 8 different bridges across the South Saskatchewan River. So when I venture out to go check out a local yarn store, sometimes you really have to trust Google Map, because I was in the middle of an industrial area, legitimately right across the tracks, going, am I in the right place? I cruised up into the strip mall, and Prairie Lily Knitting has been around. It's a weaving shop as well. It's been around for a long time, I think the 70s, and the owner and her daughter, I believe they run the place. There was another lady in there, her name was Shannon. She was lovely, she's from New Zealand, and she said, yeah, go ahead, take some footage of the shop, let's chat kind of thing. And they had some great stuff in there. It's got a good blend of things. I mean, the Silamani, I love that stuff. That took some restraint, because look at, she had I was like, oh, there's the shift cowl. I can make another one out of Illimani. She also had some West Yorkshire spinner wool, which I really do like that stuff. I love BFL. I love that. But no, I didn't purchase anything. Just had a nice visit with the lady there, and then I made my way back to the hotel. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Why don't I cruise across the bridge? Because I stayed on the one side, and if you cross the bridge, you go into, I think it's called Natana, which is like the more historic part of Saskatoon. And it was just right across the way. And Google Maps was saying that the other yarn shop here was closed permanently. But when I was talking to the lady at Prairie Lily, she's like, oh no, there's 2 yarn shops here in Saskatoon. And I was like, oh, it says closed permanently. So it was a glitch with Google Maps, because while the yarn shop is still in business, it was closed on Monday. So yeah, I just rode my bike up to Avalon Mall. It's like a strip mall. And right next to the Asian kitchen was the Wool Emporium. Looked like they had lots of good stuff in there, but I will have to come here when it's not a Monday. You know, I think a lot of people equate, well, I think Canadians maybe, they're like, oh, Saskatoon, it's cold. It's cold, of course it's cold in the winter. Yeah, but it's also one of the sunniest cities in Canada. Yeah, when it's cold, it's stinking cold, like -40 or more. A lot of people come to Saskatoon in the winter more than the summer because they come for conferences. So I guess it's just a budget-friendly place. The housing here is lovely too. Like I saw some really nice historic houses with big old trees. It does remind me, honestly, of a small Calgary, like the South Saskatchewan River versus the Bow River, but just a smaller town vibe. I mean, I'm not moving here anytime soon, but Saskatchewan itself has a warm place in my heart. My entire family is all from Southeast Saskatchewan, in Estevan and area, small towns throughout there. And I came here a lot in the summer. We would cruise out in the motorhome. It's a very long drive, but I was the co-pilot, and I would have the atlas, which was like a paper atlas. And when we cross over into the province of Saskatchewan, there's a joke, if you blink, you'll miss a town. And it's kind of like that. And I'd be like, oh, okay, we're at the town, and we'd laugh. The names are Drinkwater. Oh, what? And then when we got to Weyburn, we're like, oh man, we're almost there, because then it's a right turn and down you go into Estevan. So yeah, I do love Saskatchewan. It is prairie beauty, and I think it maybe gets a bit of a hard time, but I don't know, for me it feels like a safe, good place. So that was my Saskatoon adventure, and I really quite enjoyed it. Next up, I wanted to chat about my works in progress, and I had a live. I wanted to talk about that. I did a live through Instagram, and I wanted to do one through YouTube, but I needed special permission to do that. So anyway, I still posted the live because it was really fun to do. And on that, I felt very connected, able to chit chat with people, which I think is part of why I like to knit and why I wanted to podcast in the first place. I want to talk back and forth. Let me know what you think about lives. I am going to put that out there as to get a bit of feedback, but I really felt like quite natural doing it, and I kind of liked it. Yeah. So on that live, I was showing my work in progress, which is my Kiiruna shawl. And I'm making mine out of Briggs & Little Sport. The light in the background makes it look quite airy, which it is pretty dense actually, honest. I did go up to a 4mm needle, a US 6. The pattern calls for 3.75, I believe. It is a paid pattern. And it's just lovely garter stitch, which I'm all on right now, so I'm loving that. Very mindless. And then you get to the bottom, and then I'm gonna have to concentrate to do that little lace, like 2 lace panels. And I had two full Briggs & Little Sport skeins, and someone else who had made it with Briggs & Little Sport, and they used, I think it was 2.5, so I might have to order a third, unless I just decide it doesn't need to be too big. But right now I'm still working on the increases. It's super simple. This is marking my right side. You increase at the beginning of the row, increase at the center stitch, and then on the other side of the center stitch, and then one more increase on the other side. So 4 stitches are increased on the right side, and then on the wrong side, garter stitch, zip, whipping along. So I'm quite liking that mindlessness of it. So stay tuned for the Kiiruna shawl. I wanted to show you my emergency. In 2019, my niece Amber was expecting a little baby boy, and her nursery theme was space. And Auntie's like, oh, I've been saving a pattern for this very moment. And so what I did was I made a robot. Rebecca Danger has this pattern called Louie the Lovebot. And she's a brilliant toy designer. She does, look how cute, right? So I had this in my queue for years. And I didn't know, but I needed to make it for my future nephew. So I made him Louie the Lovebot. So that was in 2019. There's my niece, about ready to have my little nephew, whose name is Ethan. And I think Louie was just so fun to make, and he was super cute. And I'm talking about him like he's past tense. He is not past tense, but he is in need of deep repair. And guess why? Because my little nephew Ethan, there's a picture of him, takes him everywhere. It's like the knitting auntie's dream of, like, you make something and the little dude has to have. He calls him Dewey. Instead of a Louie, it's D-O-U-I-E. So I went out to visit my sister, and she'd been telling me that Dewey was getting pretty threadbare. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to go repair him. So I brought some extra wool, and I quickly realized that Dewey was not just like a patch job. So, and also I made Dewey using Viking Garn Reflector. So it's hard to capture, but he glows in the dark because of the reflective nature of the wool. And so without further ado, I started immediately on Louie number 2. So he is coming along, same colors-ish. The gray and the blue are both reflective. And Ethan is now 3. And if Dewey lasts him till he's in kindergarten, Dewey number 2, then that just makes my heart sing. And I'm working on his left or right arm. So he's missing a few body parts, but he's coming together quick. So Auntie Leanne will be finishing up this emergency Louie number 2 and taking him out to little Ethan. Have you ever made like a gift for somebody, a little one, that they just love it so much? Like, I've made blankets for nieces and nephews before, cardigans, those kinds of things, but this toy that he just loves his little guy and brings him everywhere, and maybe or maybe not sleep without having him. So I was like, well, this is an emergency. When you have a 3-year-old, you need them to sleep. So that's what I'm going to work on for the rest of the afternoon. And then I wanted to show you what I have recently purchased. I got this when I went to Hamilton at the Hand Knit Yarn Studio. It's BioBalance 3 skeins, and I did purchase it with a pattern in mind, the Anker summer shirt. And I saw somebody who had made it with the BioBalance, which is 55% pure organic wool and 45% pure organic cotton. And this colorway, I think it's, it doesn't actually say on here, but it's like, I'll put it in the show notes. But isn't that beautiful? It's like it's a little washed out here, but it's more on the darker green side than the blue side. But yeah, so I am digging this idea of making one more summer knit, and then I'm going to dive into my last thing on the queue, which is the Fidra Cowl by Gudrun Johnston. I have made the Fidra hat, and it's in the pattern. She actually designed it using Brooklyn tweed quarry. But I'm going to dive in, maybe, and try some Unspun, because that would be super light to make it with. But I also have some chunky yarn from Custom Woolen Mills that would also work. I hope you're having a joyful making journey, whatever you're creating or knitting or crocheting or spinning or weaving or embroidering, or whatever you're up to. Maybe you're out on a river somewhere or by a beach. But I hope you're well and safe and happy, and thanks so much for joining me on board today, and we will see you again soon. Bye.